YouTube, we're talking college sports in the Deep South, where college football is king, and on the plains of Auburn, the battle cry is War Eagle. Week 2 for the Auburn Tigers taking on the Tulane Green Wave. Go ahead and like this video, comment, and subscribe to the channel. And as always, it's great to be an Auburn Tiger, War Eagle. Week 2 under the lights in Jordan-Hare Stadium. 7:30 Eastern Time, 6:30 Central. The Auburn Tigers will take on Tulane in Jordan-Hare Stadium, the first home game of the season for the Auburn Tigers, as they are coming off a big victory over Oregon. Likewise, Tulane coming off of a 42-13 win over Florida International University. One thing to note about the Tulane Green Wave: over the past 5 years, they haven't been particularly successful on the recruiting trail. Their highest recruiting class in the last few years has been a 68 ranked recruiting class, but the average is around about 90. So it's been a really hard go for the Tulane Green Wave to get recruits, and for obvious reasons. Tulane University is located in New Orleans. Guess who they have to compete with recruiting-wise? Obviously, LSU, Mississippi State. Also now, have always had to compete with Texas A&M. So just from a locale standpoint, it's just really hard to get guys to go down to Tulane to play football. But based on the limited talent, in my honest opinion, that they have, they do relatively well, coming off of a 7-6 season, push Wake Forest into overtime on last season. We all know Wake Forest is a team out of the ACC, but just didn't have a lot of luck. Lost to Ohio State 49-6 on last season. Lost to UAB. They did beat Memphis, though, Kenny Dillingham's former team, and also capped it off with a bowl appearance against Louisiana Lafayette, winning that game 41-24, giving them some type of momentum coming into this particular football season. Well, what is Tulane, especially on offense, what do they like to do? Well, one of their favorite receiver targets is Darnell Mooney out of Gadsden, Alabama, who had about 1,000 yards on last year. He's one of the favorite targets for Justin McMillan, the quarterback, who transferred from LSU, a graduate transfer from LSU, who is not necessarily superiorly talented, but he adds a talented element to this particular Tulane team, who just finds it very hard to recruit in that particular area. Another thing you want to look at also with Tulane is KJ Britt and Owen Pappo. This will actually be a pretty good game for those linebackers, because Tulane likes to run a lot of tempo. They run a lot of their offense, no huddle, various sets. They like to run the three wide receivers to the left, one to the right. Sometimes they run a stack formation. They like to run a lot of screen passes, a lot of quick plays. So it's really going to test the speed of the Auburn Tigers. So what I expect for Tulane to do is to try to utilize Auburn speed and really use Auburn speed against them. Create a lot of imbalance and maybe create some big plays to keep themselves some kind of way in this particular football game. But just looking at what I saw on video footage of the Tulane Green Wave, it's going to be very, very difficult for Tulane to keep up, especially when you talk about the defensive line for Auburn going up against the offensive line of Tulane, they're okay for the level of conference play that they, compete against in the American Conference. But I just think the Auburn defensive line is just going to be way, way, way too athletic and way, way too dominant for too much of what Tulane likes to do to work. And also, with the upgrades at the linebacker position for the Auburn Tigers, you talk about Zacoby McClain, KJ Britt, Owen Pappo. This is going to be a very, very difficult game for Tulane to be able to move the football. Also, when you look at the Tulane Green Wave on the defensive side of the football, they have some very, very sneaky, talented football players. The only thing is, I'm just not sure how they're going to be overly effective in a very, very much improved offensive line for the Auburn Tigers. The Auburn Tigers had a great deal of success, especially in the second half, being able to get a push on the Oregon defensive line, who is obviously much more talented than what Tulane has to offer. But one thing to note is Tulane runs a really interesting type of defense where they have what they call the Joker linebacker. Is very similar to the Buck linebacker, and is very similar to the Jack linebacker that Oregon likes to run, that where they had Troy Dye in that particular position. In this portion of the Tulane defense, they have Patrick Johnson, who was number 34, but he's now number 7. And he has been a strong force for the Tulane Green Wave over the last few years. Does a very, very good job of anchoring this particular defense. Held Florida International University to 14 points. Also, you got to look at DeAndre Williams at the defensive tackle. He's going to really, really challenge the Auburn offensive line, but I don't think it's going to be enough because the Auburn offensive line, obviously a lot more physical, a lot more talented, and it's just going to be a tough go, honestly, for the Tulane Green Wave, who in way back in the day, Auburn and Tulane were actually conference rivals, kind of similar to what Auburn and LSU. Matter of fact, Tulane and Auburn back then is kind of like what LSU and Auburn is now. They played in a couple of neutral site locations, played in New Orleans, played in Montgomery. And, it's very nice to have a revisitation of a very, very nostalgic rivalry in college football. But for this particular game, what I would really, really like to see for the Auburn Tigers to do is really start to establish a firm running game, really start to establish the intermediate passing game to start to get some rhythm as they prepare for Southeastern Conference play. Because here's the deal. When you're playing against a team that is obviously less talented, who's probably going to make a lot of mistakes because of the anxiety that being less talented and, lesser quality coaching and things like development brings, what you want to do as if you're an Auburn Tiger, if you're the Auburn Tigers, what you want to do is you want to have sustained drives. You want to execute on plays that will be transferable. And what I mean by transferable, you want to execute on plays that will be high percentage against higher quality teams. In a game like this, you don't want a 60-0 win that's, predicated off of the mistakes of Tulane. You want to have a dominant, say 42-10, 50-7 or whatever win, but you win the game because of execution. Because when you start talking about competing against menial opponents, it's all about solidifying and shoring up execution, making sure you don't miss blocking assignments, making sure you don't overrun plays on defense. And that's what Auburn has to accomplish in this particular game. I have no doubt. No doubt in my mind that Auburn wins this game. But the important piece is how they win the game. Because if you have a 51-7 win, but it's punt returns for touchdowns, scoop and scores, things like that, you don't accomplish the things that you need to accomplish to make yourself better and more prepared down the stretch for what's going to be a very, very interesting, I'm not going to say brutal, but it's going to be a very interesting SEC stretch between the Texas A&M game and getting better each week and going into the LSU game to culminate what we hope will be the biggest game for Auburn in the SEC. Huge win over Oregon, because when you go into a game like Tulane, you would much rather go into a game like this with a big win over a quality opponent versus a loss to a quality opponent and you're in redemptive mode instead of, say, development. Let's shore some things up. Let's go ahead and start to get game plan opportunities solidified before the start of the quote unquote real deal competition of the SEC. Now, like I said before, Auburn, especially on defense, Tulane likes to run a lot of tempo. And what you don't want to do if you're the Auburn Tigers is get caught out of position, to get caught missing assignments. One thing I like about Owen Papo for the Auburn Tigers is the fact that he is fast, but especially for a young guy at that linebacker position, he does a very good job of controlling and making sure that he executes his level of speed. He has very good vision, and he has very, very good instincts as far as how to attack the ball. If you notice in the Oregon game, he did overrun a lot of plays. He wasn't caught out of position a lot, and he's very active, especially in pass coverage as well, which is what we thought that he would be. Best case scenario, Auburn gets to a fast start, 30 plus points, say, in the first half, and give the opportunity for some of their reserve players to get some playing time, to go ahead and start to solidify some quality depth going into that SEC stretch. And this is a good opportunity to do so. But what Auburn doesn't want to do is find themselves playing, down somewhat to their opponent, and then, catching yourself in a very unnecessary dogfight. And next thing you know, the things that you want to accomplish against a team like this, you can't, because instead of shoring up some things, as far as execution, as far as, starting to get some type of solidification, you're now having to reverse your game plan to have a dogfight to win this game. Because we saw that against Mercer. I think that was back in 2017. In 2015 against Jacksonville State. That's a waste. That's really a waste. You want to go ahead and do I always like to compare our arch rival, Alabama. They go ahead and take care of teams like this and go ahead and have the opportunity to get some players, some experience, and some in-game experience. Go ahead and get a feel for the gameplay of Power 5 football. I'd like to see, say Charles Moore and Derek Hall and some of those guys get in, defensive linemen for Auburn. I'd also like to see a little bit more of the Auburn running backfield to get some touches in this game. So a very, very nice opportunity for the Auburn Tigers against a menial opponent, but they're really good in spots, to go ahead and get that experience and continue to develop into the kind of team that they can be. I don't think you need to be messing around with Tulane and, making this a knockdown drag out where you have to pull away midway through the third quarter. Take care of business in the first half, get some reserve guys in there, and move forward. We're going to have some more information about Tulane as the week progresses. This is part 2 of our coverage of the Tulane Green Wave going into the second week of the college football season for the Auburn Tigers. Auburn is currently the 10th ranked team in the nation after a huge win over Oregon. Once again, it's Kennard Vernon Stewart here for the podcast, talking a little bit about Auburn football, surveying the Tulane Green Wave. Very, very, decent team that really, really deserves the respect game plan wise, so Auburn can continue to solidify and, get their what they want to establish as the identity of this team down the stretch. Go ahead and like this video, comment, and subscribe to the channel. And as always, it's great to be an Auburn Tiger, War Eagle.